Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I've been thinking about what you said. I began, my voice steadier than I felt regarding the open marriage proposal. Kathy's knife stilled, her knuckles white against the handle as she processed my words. And I'm willing to try, I added, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. But I have some conditions of my own. The fulfillment center hummed around me, a constant backdrop to my racing thoughts. 18 years together, 15 of them married. A lifetime. Really? Yet here I stood on the precipice of change, my hands busy with inventory while my mind wandered far beyond these walls. Ben and I had built a good life. Our son Alex, now 12, filled our home with the clatter of video games and the occasional burst of preteen drama, his laughter echoing through the rooms. We had our routines, Ben heading off to the ad agency, where he worked as a creative director, and me overseeing operations at the e-commerce fulfillment center. It was comfortable, safe, and therein lay the problem. As I moved through my day, checking shipments and managing staff, an idea took root. It had been growing for months, really, but today it blossomed into something I couldn't ignore. An open marriage. The very words sent a thrill through me, a mixture of excitement and terror. I pictured Ben's face, the furrow that would appear between his brows when I broached the subject. He'd argue against it, of course. Ben, ever the pragmatist, would see the risks, the potential for hurt. The thought of challenging the status quo filled me with both dread and a strange sense of freedom. What would it mean for us? Would it tear apart the life we had built? Or could it somehow bring us closer together? I needed to find out, but I also knew him well enough to know he'd listen. He always did. The drive home that evening felt longer than usual. I rehearsed my words, crafting arguments and counter-arguments. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my palms were slick on the steering wheel. Now let's check Kathy's side of the story. Dinner passed in a blur of routine. Alex's chatter about school, Ben's anecdotes from work. I smiled and nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. When Alex finally retreated to his room, headphones firmly in place, I knew it was time. I want to talk about us, I began, watching Ben's face carefully about our marriage. His eyes met mine, warm and familiar. I almost faltered then, nearly lost my nerve, but the restlessness that had been building for months pushed me forward. I've been thinking about the possibility of an open marriage. The words hung in the air between us, charged with potential and uncertainty. I braced myself for his reaction, my heart racing as I prepared for whatever came next. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken implications. I watched emotions flicker across Ben's face, confusion, hurt, disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, struggling to process what I had just said. When he finally found his voice, it was low and controlled. Where is this coming from? And so it began. We talked for hours, our voices barely above whispers, mindful of Alex just down the hall. I poured out my feelings, explaining the restlessness that had settled in my bones, the sense that there was more for both of us to explore. Ben countered with concerns about our family, our commitment, and the potential for jealousy and hurt. I love you, I insisted, reaching for his hand, my heart racing with each word. That hasn't changed, but I feel like we could have more, experience more, without losing what we have. As the conversation unfolded, I sensed the weight of our history, our shared moments pressing down on us. It was a delicate balance, navigating the familiar while stepping into uncharted territory. Ben withdrew his hand, running it through his hair instead. And Alex, have you thought about how this could affect him? Of course, I had. The last thing I wanted was to hurt our son. We'd be discreet, I assured him, trying to quell the doubts creeping into his expression. We can set boundaries. As the night wore on, I laid out the rules I had been formulating in my mind. No dating friends or family, no bringing partners home, no discussing our dating activities with each other. With each suggestion, I watched Ben's resolve waver, his brows knitting together in thought. Finally, exhaustion overtook us both. Ben sighed. I need time to think about this, to process it. I nodded, relief and anticipation warring within me. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. As we prepared for bed, moving around each other in familiar patterns that suddenly felt foreign, my mind drifted to the possibilities that lay ahead. Would this new path bring us closer together, or would it unravel the fabric of our lives? The uncertainty tinged with excitement left me restless, but I was willing to embrace the journey. The charming barista at my favorite coffee shop, the colleague from a neighboring department whose laugh always caught my attention. Lying in bed, Ben's back a rigid line beside me, I allowed myself to hope that this could be the beginning of something new, something exciting for both of us. Ben's voice, thick with emotion, broke through the darkness. I'll think about it, but I can't promise anything. I reached out, my fingertips just brushing his shoulder. That's all I'm asking for now, just to think about it. As sleep finally claimed me, I couldn't help but wonder what the coming days would bring. Change was coming. I could feel it. Now let's check Ben's side of the story. The weight of Kathy's proposal sat heavy in my chest as I navigated the bustling streets on my way to work. The city around me buzzed with life, and I felt a strange thrill at the prospect of what lay ahead. Would I be able to explore this new territory without losing the foundation of my family? The question swirled in my mind like the steam rising from the coffee cups I passed. The morning rush of the city usually energized me, sparking ideas for new campaigns. Today, however, it all felt muted, overshadowed by the looming decision before me. As I settled into my office, surrounded by the creative chaos of half-finished storyboards and concept sketches, I found myself unable to focus. My mind kept circling back to Kathy's words and the look in her eyes as she spoke of an open marriage. The initial hurt and confusion I'd felt had given way to a sort of numb pragmatism. I thought of Alex, our son, with his mop of unruly hair and his inherited stubborn streak. The idea of him shuffling between two homes, caught in the crossfire of a bitter divorce, made my stomach churn. Perhaps, I reasoned, agreeing to Kathy's proposal was the lesser evil. Better for Alex to grow up in a stable environment, even if the foundation was built on a precarious arrangement. As I absent-mindedly scrolled through emails, the weight of the decision pressed heavily on my chest. Was I willing to risk everything for the chance of something different? And if I did, how would I navigate the complexities of our new arrangement? The questions hung in the air like the morning fog outside my window, each one more daunting than the last. By the time I returned home that evening, my decision was made. I found Kathy in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with mechanical precision. The set of her shoulders told me she was bracing for another argument. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "About the open marriage." Kathy's knife stilled, her knuckles white against the handle. "And I'm willing to try," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "But I have some conditions of my own." Relief and excitement warred on Kathy's face as I listed my terms. "No compulsion to fulfill each other's physical or emotional needs," I stated, my tone firm. "No divorce, at least until Alex leaves for college. And protection must be used at all times." Her expression shifted from surprise to understanding, a mix of hope and caution. It was clear that while we were stepping into uncharted territory, we were also laying the groundwork for a new kind of partnership, one that acknowledged our past while allowing us the freedom to explore our futures. In case of pregnancy, the spouse is not responsible. Kathy nodded eagerly, reaching for my hand. I let her take it, even as I felt a chasm widening between us. "There's one more thing," I added, gently extracting my hand from hers. "We need to make this official. A postnuptial agreement, signed by both of us. Verbal agreements don't hold up in court." A flicker of hesitation crossed Kathy's face, quickly replaced by determination. "Of course," she agreed. "Whatever you need to feel comfortable with this." As I watched her return to her meal preparation, humming softly to herself, a plan began to form in the recesses of my mind. 6 years, I thought. 6 years until Alex graduated high school. 6 years to secure our assets, to build a safety net for myself and our son. I plastered on a smile as Kathy called Alex to dinner, pushing away the guilt that gnawed at my conscience. In that moment, I made a silent vow to myself and to my son. We would weather this storm, and when the time came, we would emerge unscathed. The first seeds of my exit strategy were sown, hidden beneath a veneer of reluctant acceptance. As we sat down to our family meal, the usual chatter filling the air, I felt a strange mix of hope and dread settle in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't help but wonder how long this facade would hold. A month into our new arrangement, I found myself adrift in uncharted waters. The initial thrill of possibility had given way to a complex tangle of emotions I struggled to unravel. I had gone on dates with 3, maybe 4 of the people I'd fantasized about for so long. The barista with the infectious laugh, the colleague whose eyes always seemed to linger. Each encounter left me with a curious mix of satisfaction and emptiness. Now let's check Kathy's side of the story. Physically, my needs were met. I rediscovered parts of myself I thought long dormant, experiencing the heady rush of new touch and taste. I felt wanted, which was an ego boost. But as the novelty wore off, I began to notice the hollowness that followed, the emotional connection, the ineffable spark that turns an encounter into something more, remained frustratingly elusive. I had expected this newfound freedom to fill a void, yet it only deepened my sense of isolation. I was exploring the surface of intimacy, but beneath it lay a vast ocean of longing for something deeper, something that had once felt secure and fulfilling in my marriage. At home, the silence grew oppressive. Ben had retreated to his man cave on the first floor, emerging only to leave for work or to grab a meal. The space between us, once comfortable, now yawned like a chasm. I found myself listening for his footsteps, both dreading and longing for those brief moments of proximity. Our bedroom, which had once been a shared sanctuary, now felt cavernous and cold. I'd wake in the night, instinctively reaching for a warmth that was no longer there. The emptiness of Ben's side of the bed mocked me, a physical manifestation of the distance between us. I tried to fill the void with more dates and encounters, but each one left me feeling increasingly alone. The fleeting excitement of new connections faded, revealing an aching emptiness that I couldn't ignore. I was seeking intimacy in all the wrong places, only to discover that the deeper connection I craved was still tied to the very person I was trying to distance myself from. The more I reached out, the more isolated I felt, trapped in a cycle of superficial interactions that did nothing to mend the growing rift in my marriage. I began to question my choices, wondering if the price of this newfound freedom was higher than I'd anticipated. One evening, as I sat alone at the dinner table, the sound of Ben and Alex's laughter drifted down from upstairs. The easy camaraderie in their voices pierced through me. When had I last heard Ben laugh like that? When had we last shared a moment of genuine connection? I found myself hovering at the bottom of the stairs, one foot on the first step, wrestling with the urge to join them. But the invisible barrier Ben had erected felt impenetrable. Instead, I retreated to the living room, where the TV provided a poor substitute for companionship. As days turned into weeks, I realized with growing dismay that the open marriage I had lobbied so hard for had become a prison of my own making. What had initially seemed like a path to liberation now felt like a suffocating trap, leaving me longing for the very connection I had sought to redefine. The freedom I had craved now felt like isolation. Ironically, the man I thought I needed space from, Ben, was the one I missed most of all. The transition to our new arrangement went more smoothly than I'd anticipated. In truth, our marriage had often felt more like a carefully maintained facade than a genuine, living relationship for years. Our sex life had dwindled to nothing over the past 2 years, and we had been sharing a bedroom in name only for far longer than that. Moving my belongings to the upstairs room was merely a formality, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance that had long existed between us. Now let's check Ben's side of the story. Yet with that move came an unexpected sense of liberation. I was free from tiptoeing around Kathy's moods, free from forced conversations and awkward silences. I had carved out a life for myself beyond our marital struggles, exploring new connections and activities. But as the initial thrill began to fade, the reality of my loneliness settled in, making me realize that the absence of Ben's companionship left a void that no number of new encounters could fill. The gym had become my sanctuary, and yoga and meditation were my tools for maintaining not just physical health but mental equilibrium. These practices instilled in me a discipline that extended to all aspects of my life, including control over my physical needs. My man cave quickly became my haven, set up with all the comforts I needed: a large TV, cable, and a gaming console. When I wasn't at work, I could retreat there, insulated from the tension that seemed to permeate the rest of the house. Alex was the only one who regularly breached my self-imposed isolation. Smart kid that he was, he never said anything outright, but I could see in his eyes that he understood things had shifted. He was perceptive enough to realize that the change in living arrangements was just a symptom of a deeper issue. His attempts to draw me out, whether through a shared gaming session or a casual conversation about school, were gentle nudges, reminders of the bond we still shared amid the turmoil. Yet, I found myself torn between the desire to connect with him and the weight of my own struggles, feeling unworthy of his affection and understanding. But Alex and I had always been close. He looked up to me, loved our shared interests in both outdoor activities and console gaming. Our bond, if anything, seemed to strengthen in the face of the family's new dynamic. It was a bright spot in an otherwise complicated situation. One day, as I was grabbing a quick lunch in the kitchen, Kathy cornered me. "Have you hooked up with anyone?" she asked, her tone a mixture of curiosity and something I couldn't quite identify. Accusation? Jealousy? I met her gaze steadily. "I'm not interested in dating," I told her plainly. I agreed to this arrangement because of you. It was never something I wanted for myself. Her silence stretched for several long moments, thick with unspoken words. Then she replied, "You must be seeing someone from work," her voice tight. "You never go out to socialize." I merely shrugged, turning back to my meal. The conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth. I could sense her frustration bubbling beneath the surface, the cracks in our agreement widening. It was frustrating to be accused of something I had no intention of doing, especially when my focus was on navigating this tumultuous phase of our lives. Kathy's suspicions only deepened my resolve to maintain boundaries, but they also added an element of unease to our already fragile arrangement. Each moment felt like a test, a dance around the real issues that lingered unaddressed. "Think whatever you want," I replied, my tone neutral. As I headed back upstairs, I could feel her eyes on me, but I kept walking. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. The path forward for both of us remained unclear. Now let's check Kathy's side of the story. The house feels emptier with each passing day. It's not just Ben's warmth I miss now, it's Alex's presence too. My son, my little boy, seems to have slipped away from me, gravitating towards his father like a satellite locked in orbit. At home, Alex's laughter echoes from upstairs, where he and Ben share their private world of video games and inside jokes. When they go out, it's always just the two of them, their backs to me as they walk out the door. I find myself standing at the threshold of their camaraderie, longing to be included yet unsure how to bridge the gap that has formed. Each shared moment between them feels like a reminder of my own isolation, a physical manifestation of the rift that has grown between us. I worry that Alex will forget about me, that he'll see Ben as the sole anchor in his life, while I fade into the background. With each passing day, I struggle to reclaim my place in this family dynamic. I want to share in their laughter, to be part of their world again, but every attempt feels like it's met with resistance. I remind myself that change takes time, but the loneliness settles around me like a heavy blanket, smothering the warmth that used to fill our home. I find myself lingering in Alex's room when he's not around, touching his belongings, trying to reconnect with the little boy who once clung to my leg and begged for bedtime stories. The final blow came at Christmas. Typically, we'd all go away together, functioning as a family despite our fractures. This year, though, Ben and Alex went to the Caribbean without me. They called it a boys' trip, even inviting my divorced brother, Jake. The message was unmistakable. I wasn't welcome. In an effort to salvage our bond, I promised Alex a trip to Paris, the city he's always dreamed of visiting. But he barely glanced up from his phone as he turned me down, already packed for the trip with his father. As the door closed behind them, the silence in the house felt like a physical weight pressing in on me. Christmas and New Year's passed in a blur of loneliness, and I found myself staring at old family photos, wondering how we had ended up in this place. The woman in those pictures, smiling and content, felt like a stranger to me now. My attempts at dating have soured. The thrill of new encounters has faded, leaving behind a string of men who seek nothing more than physical gratification. Even that feels empty now, a poor substitute for the connection I long for. Despite keeping up my appearance, I faced a harsh reality about the dating scene at my age. Younger men see me as a potential source of financial support, with some even brazenly asking for money. The rest seem to view me as nothing more than a fleeting distraction. Regret has become my constant companion. I should have concentrated on rejuvenating our marriage and rekindling the spark that once burned so brightly between Ben and me. Instead, I opened a Pandora's box, and now I find myself unsure how to close it. As I gaze into the future, all I see is a series of lonely holidays spent among other bitter, single women who have made similar missteps. The open marriage I envisioned as a source of excitement and fulfillment has instead left me feeling more isolated than ever. Now let's check Ben's side of the story. Kathy's attempts to roll back the clock haven't gone unnoticed. One night, while Alex was at a friend's house, she tried to seduce me. The Kathy of a few years ago might have succeeded, but now I gently rebuffed her advances. Her next approach was to play on my guilt. With teary-eyed accusations and reminders of our shared history, she tried to draw me back in. I calmly reminded her that I had warned her about the potential consequences of an open marriage. She had been so certain that the grass would be greener on the other side. And now that she's discovered it's just a barren field, she wants to return home. But home isn't the same place anymore. I'm keeping my side of the bargain, I told her firmly. You need to keep yours. One day, Alex, perceptive as ever, cornered me. Why don't you knock some sense into Mom's head? He asked, worry etched on his young face. I smiled and ruffled his hair, responding softly, She's beyond that, buddy. What's happening now? He asked, concern evident in his voice. It's for financial reasons, I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. You'll understand why I did things this way in a few years. What I couldn't share with him was the meticulous plan I had been executing behind the scenes. Slowly and carefully, I had been moving assets overseas to places Kathy would never suspect and couldn't touch, even if she did. I was also setting things up for Alex, ensuring he would have a solid financial foundation when he went to college and beyond. My plan for the house was to transfer ownership to Alex, guaranteeing that when the time came, Kathy would find herself with nothing, no alimony, no claim on my assets. I was already laying the groundwork, preparing to scale down my work and drop my income below Kathy's level. The divorce papers would be ready to serve the day Alex leaves for college. My timeline was clear: retire in 5 years and transition to occasional consultancy work. On paper, my income will appear meager. In reality, I'll have secured a comfortable future for both myself and Alex. Occasionally, I pause to reflect on the morality of what I'm doing. But then I recall the look in Kathy's eyes when she first suggested opening our marriage, the way she dismissed my concerns as trivial. I think about Alex caught in the middle of this mess. Each time, I remind myself, no, this isn't just about me protecting myself. I'm securing a future for my son, free from the financial entanglements that so often poison families after divorce. Kathy made her choice. Now it's time for me to make mine. Now let's check Kathy's side of the story. 6 years have passed since that fateful day I proposed opening our marriage, 6 years that feel like a lifetime. Each day a stark reminder of what I've lost. The dating scene, once alluring in my fantasies, has turned into a barren wasteland. Whenever I managed to secure dates, they inevitably ended in disappointment. I encountered selfish men, more interested in what I could offer them for a night, or maybe two. There was no connection, no warmth, none of the excitement I had naively anticipated. As the years went by, even those unsatisfying encounters dwindled. More often than not, I found myself alone, the silence of the house a constant reminder of my mistakes. The good life I had with Ben, the life I had taken for granted, slipped through my fingers like sand. I kept telling myself that things would improve, that Ben and I could reset our relationship once Alex left for college. It became a mantra, a thin thread of hope I clung to as our son's high school graduation approached. I planned conversations in my head, rehearsed apologies, and imagined tearful reconciliations. But Ben, it seemed, had plans of his own. The day after we dropped Alex off at his dorm, he served me with divorce papers. The shock hit me like a physical blow. How could I not have seen this coming? All those years of distance, of living separate lives under one roof, had led to this moment, and I had been too blind to recognize it. As the divorce proceedings unfolded, another harsh reality set in. Our assets and the life we had built together were vanishing. Ben had planned meticulously, transferring everything to places beyond my reach. The house, our savings, everything was gone. I found myself facing a future I had never imagined. Single and starting over from scratch in middle age. The irony of it all is bitter on my tongue. I had wanted freedom, excitement, a chance to explore. Instead, I had engineered my own downfall. Ben didn't ask for alimony, a small mercy in the grand scheme of things. But as I sit in my small, rented apartment, surrounded by the meager possessions I managed to keep, that mercy feels hollow. I gave up a good man, a stable life, and a close relationship with my son, all for a fantasy that never materialized. Alex calls occasionally, his voice guarded, our conversations stilted. I hear echoes of his father in his tone, in the careful way he chooses his words. Another victim of my own foolishness. As I navigate this new, solitary life, I'm haunted by memories of what once was: family dinners, shared laughter, and the warmth of Ben's smile, all sacrificed at the altar of my misguided desires. The open marriage I once championed, the freedom I thought I wanted, has turned into a prison of my own making. Now, facing the consequences of my choices, I'm left with nothing but regret and the painful realization that I have no one to blame but myself. The warm Caribbean breeze tousles my hair as I lean against the railing of the cruise ship. Beside me, Jake, once my brother-in-law, now simply a good friend, raises his glass in a silent toast. Now let's check Ben's side of the story. We're a month into our world tour, celebrating freedom and new beginnings. The divorce is finalized, and the last ties to my old life have been neatly severed. Everything unfolded just as I had hoped, and that thought still brings a smile to my face. Years of careful planning, quietly securing assets and preparing for this moment, have finally paid off. Only Alex knows the full extent of my actions and where I've stashed the fruits of my labor. He's the sole guardian of that knowledge, entrusted to access it all if anything were to happen to me. It's a heavy burden for a young man, but he's shown remarkable wisdom beyond his years. I'm proud of him and proud of the man he's becoming. As for me, I'm free. The open marriage that Kathy pushed for turned out to be a blessing in disguise, though I doubt many men would find themselves in my fortunate position. It provided the time and space I needed to prepare, ensuring that when the end came, it would be on my terms. Now, with the world laid out before me and no ties holding me back, I find myself looking forward to whatever comes next. This is a new chapter, one I never expected to write. As I watch the sun set over the endless horizon, a sense of anticipation washes over me. For the first time in years, the future looks incredibly bright. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.